Ubisoft, you need stop! I played your pathetic little video game for an entire day. An entire day that took me 2 weeks to trudge through. And here I was thinking that things would be different this time around. I thought that by waiting for 2 years after its release that the game would be a little more polished than usual, but I was wrong. The cold, vacant, empty void of this eternal, bottomless abyss beneath the map is the perfect visual metaphor for how I felt while playing Far Cry 6. Complete and utter emptiness. Dear viewer, I would like to welcome you to Yara. It's pretty beautiful, is it not? Come and enjoy a ride on one of its many zip lines. Take a load off by hanging out with some character models at the beach. De-stress by catching fish in its serene jungles. You will enjoy the endless battles you will have with Yara's wildlife, as nearly every single predator that resides there will blindly attack you and no one else. Unlike Castillo's men, who seemingly turn a blind eye towards you, as when they spot you, they seem to have no earthly idea how to chase you, so you need not worry about law enforcement during your stay here.
What?
You will want to watch out for the general populace, though, as civilians will intentionally ram into you on many occasions. Civilians will also run into your car so that they can collect disability checks. Ubisoft clearly outdid themselves in making a truly believable little slice of paradise. They even found a way to implement the stillness and mundanities of reality, as there are many stretches of time where there is literally nothing happening at all, and you are forced to traverse through endless amounts of this aforementioned nothingness. But during one of these stretches, I desperately needed a car. So I killed an innocent man in order to steal his, but his car just kept on coasting because he forgot to slam his brakes due to being murdered. After a few moments of running, I had finally caught up to the car, and as I hopped inside of it, I was shocked to see that there was a random woman hanging out in the back seat who clearly had no idea what just happened. Her father, or husband, had just been shot in the head by me, the driving force of the Libertad Revolution, yet she was seemingly unfazed by my actions. It was here when I realized that I could do anything I wanted without repercussions. I slew people's dogs as though my father had just been hit in the head with a golf club, and nobody cared. Nothing about this world felt believable. It was all a thinly veiled facade, making the game's location of Yara a place I genuinely did not care to save.
Oye, help. Thank you, guerrilla.
Far Cry 6 can be a pretty boring game a lot of the time. But luckily, Ubisoft implemented a brand new feature where you can whip out your cell phone and play Mech Arena, which is the mecca of mobile mech games. But the good news is you don't need a copy of Far Cry 6 to play Mech Arena. You see, Mech Arena is a free-to-play game wherein you can play for free after downloading it for free on a phone that you own or on a PC as a freebie. In Mech Arena, you play as a mech in an arena full of other mechs. There are also weekly tournaments that you can access early on, where you will be matched against other players of your skill level, and I can promise you that a tournament in Mech Arena is more fun than anything in Far Cry 6. Tournaments are the best way to get resources, which you can then use to purchase an array of mechs and mech weapons to destroy your enemy and turn them into a mech shake. And feel free to add me on this game so we can play together. Lucky for you, I play Mech Arena all day and all night, every day and every night. I played this game so much that now they call me Arena Gomez. Later this month, they're having a sci-fi themed event where there will be brand new maps, a new weapon, a new mech called the Scorpius, and a heavy-duty pilot as opposed to the skinny-duty pilots that are in the rest of the game. If you use my personal link or scan the QR code on screen, you'll get a starter pack, which comes with a Prodigi Crate, 300 A coins, and Pulse Canon 4. How cool is that? All right, now let's get back to the video. Because these games are so easy, I played on Gorilla, hardest difficulty, where you have low ammo reserves and the enemies have heightened awareness and they do more damage. I'll be honest with you, this game was pretty difficult for my enemies. Their heightened awareness was no match for my unrivaled sneakage. and they didn't stand a chance against my signature move, which was to simply shoot them in the head. It wasn't long till word got out that I was the baddest motherfucker in town. All enemies that crossed my path were decimated. It was like I was the Master Chief, and they were cavemen. They all grew to fear me, and fear makes people do really stupid things. Chopper pilots would get down to my level and make themselves easier to shoot. Some of these enemies would bump right into me and pretend they didn't even notice me, thinking that I would spare them. But me, I spare no one. They would stand next to explosive barrels. They would turn their backs to me, take cover by hiding behind an umbrella. They would zip into my line of sight, not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. They would drive their boat into concrete, lodging its turret into the docks above it, making it impossible for them to shoot me. They didn't stand a chance, and it made me feel like a god. With a simple click and a flick of my wrist, they all disappear, falling before me like a cardboard cutout of Giancarlo Esposito in a slight breeze, making me yearn for a challenge. But I am getting a little ahead of myself here, so let's quickly go back to the beginning of the game. In Far Cry 6, you play as a boy or girl named Danny Rojas, and for the first time since Far Cry 3, our protagonist actually speaks.
They got my name wrong.
And the cutscenes were shot like actual cutscenes. You know, with cinematography, shot reverse shot, that type of thing. I found this far more engaging than being tethered to the perspective of my character. There's nothing wrong with this type of cutscene delivery if it's done well, but it did get really tiring for me in Far Cry 5, as the camera remained completely static while Joseph Seed gets all up in your business, starts getting his snot all over the place, and he just would not stop talking about God. I'm sick of that guy. If I want to hear someone talk about God, I would call up my grandma, but she doesn't get very good cell phone reception in her urn. So right off the bat, I thought that things were going to be a little different based off the fact that we have a completely new cutscene delivery method. Our main character isn't a mute. We're in a big open city, which is a far cry from what we're used to seeing in our Far Cry games, and after the very first combat encounter, I discovered that they changed how suppressors work. Suppressors will still make your bullets quiet, but it will overheat after a few shots, forcing you to be more conscious during your stealth encounters. This was a welcome change in my book because it added a little layer of difficulty into the stealth. But as I lit yet another bunch of crops on fire with a flamethrower for the 3rd or 4th time in this series, I realized that Far Cry 6 was simply just more of the same.
Burning shit with a flamethrower? Felt familiar.
In games like these, I tend to have the most fun when I'm operating at a peak efficiency. The faster I get it all done, the more I'm going to enjoy it. So I got to work on immediately capturing as many bases and security checkpoints as possible so that I could use them as fast travel locations. The more fast travel spots I have available, the quicker I can fast travel around the map, due to being a faster traveler. I also needed to take down the AA guns as well, because you can't perform an airdrop from a fast travel location that is near an anti-air gun. And airdropping is essential to efficiency. Being able to spawn in from the sky and deploy your wingsuit to fly over to your nearest location is the fastest and most convenient mode of transportation in Far Cry 6. Luckily, taking out the AA guns was easy. Sometimes there's a handful of enemies guarding them, which are pretty simple to dispatch. And at other times, there were no enemies at all. So I was able to just walk up to each gun uncontested, blow it up, and get the hell out of there. I'd say about a third of the anti-air guns I took out were completely vacant, but sometimes for an additional challenge, I would fly my helicopter over to an AA gun just to prove to you guys that this game is bullshit. It was tedious, but capturing bases did allow me to get a good feel for the game's combat. Combat really sucks. First of all, most of the weapons feel terrible. The projectiles travel really slowly and enemies can be spongy. The scope sways pretty bad when you aim down sights and try to strafe from side to side, making aiming a little more difficult, but not in a good way. Because what this does is it encourages you to stand perfectly still during a firefight, since that makes it easier for you to put a bullet inside their skull. Then you realize pretty quickly that you don't need to worry about staying mobile to avoid enemy gunfire all that much, and you don't have to take cover very often. But what you will do very often is stand perfectly still during your firefights. And as you can imagine, this turns combat into a tedious affair where literally all you're doing is clicking on people's heads. And if you hadn't noticed yet, the AI is really bad. They tend to rush you in a straight line or stand perfectly still, and sometimes they can't even get their weapon ready to fight me with. I watched this poor soul fumble with her gun for an entire minute before finally gracing her with the sweet gift of death. At one point, though, I was able to make the combat look pretty cool, as the building I was in was completely surrounded by the FNC. They were coming at me from all angles, forcing me to keep my head on a swivel, and eventually I had run out of ammo with all of my guns except for this pea shooter of a machine pistol. I had to hop back and forth between doorways so as not to let the enemy overwhelm me, and I must admit, I had fun here. But for a large majority of the time, combat went a little something like this. And what makes me so frustrated is that Far Cry 6 is clearly capable of having fun combat, but the game is designed in such a way that it almost never happens. Because like I said, combat generally boiled down to nothing more than aiming at the enemy's heads until they were deads. And occasionally I would have to hide behind cover and heal myself. But I was pleased to see that they did bring back the healing animations. Those were always cool. They also introduced a new mechanic called the Supremo, and using your Supremo is essentially the equivalent of popping a super in Destiny. There are a multitude of Supremos to choose from. This one here is the Johnny Cash. It emits a ring of fire around you. Another one of them is the roaming super that allows you to kill lower level mobs with ease. Kinda reminds me of the Hunter's Blade Dance, but I never had very much use for most Supremos because the very first Supremo the game gives you launches a volley of homing missiles toward enemy tanks and helicopters, turning the most difficult enemies in the game into nothing more than an afterthought. You know, my grandfather told me that there are few things in a young man's life that he shall never forget, like his first fist fight with another young man, his first kiss with a special young lady, or the first paycheck he ever got. He told me to cling onto those warm memories for when life gets tough. And so, with that advice in mind, I'll never forget the very first 300 Far Cry credits I unlocked. I was shocked to see that you can buy crafting materials, vehicles, and weapons to speed up your progress. So much of what was on offer would cut down on a decent amount of grinding, making it a very enticing purchase, as I would consider buying anything that would make my time with this game go by faster. To me, this is like mobile game levels of disgusting. And up until this exact moment, I had no idea that a microtransaction store existed within this game. And the only reason I know it exists is because the game just gave me currency for it. And I think that's exactly why they gave me currency for this store, to show me that it exists. One thing that Far Cry 6 and, well, most of the Ubisoft games have going for them is that as you complete the multitude of tasks and objectives that the game puts in front of you, it makes you feel kind of productive. But that feeling of productivity also comes with a deep hollowness, because the fact is, all you're doing is playing Far Cry 6. Each base I captured rewarded me with XP, but the way leveling up works in this game is kind of strange. Instead of unlocking perks to upgrade your character's abilities like in most other open-world games, leveling up just means that you can now buy slightly better gear from the Resistance merchants. I don't care for this, because while I do find most of the unlockable abilities in open-world games to be arbitrary, the system Far Cry 6 has here really robs us of that sense of progression that we feel when leveling up our character. There's something inherently unsatisfying about this new system, and I can't help but feel that something pivotal is missing from the game because of it. Instead, level-based character upgrades have been replaced with perks that can be found on your clothing. So rather than choosing to reduce scope sway in the character screen after leveling up, you need to find and equip a wristband that has a perk on it which reduces scope sway. I would assume that Ubisoft implemented this system in order to encourage exploration and to incentivize us to complete more side quests. But once I found a halfway decent perk like having faster movement while reloading or reduced movement noise, I never had any desire to look for anything better. And it wasn't long until I hit level 4, which was when I gained access to the best weapon in the game. Yeah, baby, the nail gun. Stealth was already easy enough straight out of the bag thanks to the bad AI.
Someone's out.
But this nail gun I bought made the cakewalk even moister.
Flamethrower.
It is dead silent, and it doesn't overheat, completely negating the need to equip suppressors. It can one-shot enemies from insane distances. It has 40 nails in the chamber, meaning you can liberate an entire base without having to reload. And it has 240 more nails in its reserves, completely negating the limited ammo difficulty modifier here in Guerrilla mode. There's also this mechanic in the game that I haven't even talked about yet, where you're expected to swap between armor-piercing rounds to do more damage to armored enemies and soft target rounds for everybody else. But with the nail gun, you can ignore that gimmick entirely, as it has no trouble penetrating helmets. It doesn't even have trouble penetrating heavily armored helmets, completely negating the new ammo type mechanic. And the thing is too, you don't even need to headshot the enemies. You can just stun lock them with multiple body shots, because when they're stun locked, they can't set off the alarm or alert anybody. It is insanely overpowered, and it's given to you a mere 3 hours into the game. And on top of all of that, it is also a pretty viable short-range gun during actual combat. Now, I was getting pretty bored of capturing bases at this point in my playthrough, so I decided to try out the DLC where you play as Vaas to change things up a bit.
I should buy a season pass to this place.
I didn't care much for this DLC. I found it to be incredibly tedious. So in this DLC, you play as Vaas as he takes a trip into his own psyche just moments after Jason Brody from Far Cry 3 stabs him to death. To reach the ending, you are tasked with finding 3 pieces of the dagger that Jason Brody from Far Cry 3 used to stab him to death. While I enjoy the creativity and overall idea of this DLC, it's still marred by all the problems that the main game has. You know, like boring combat, bad AI, general jankiness, that type of thing. It's supposed to be this die and retry, roguelite, Souls-like deal where you get a bunch of money for killing enemies or opening chests, and you can also find perks that grant you helpful abilities like quieter sprinting. But when you die, you lose all of that money and all of those perks. So it's best to use that money before you die to purchase permanent upgrades for Vaas and his weapons. But the thing is, I didn't really die, so I didn't have much use for a majority of the upgrades that were available to me. You're also given a very small open world area, with trials littered around the map that upon completion reward you with different guns, money, and special perks, like having an extra life, which would have come in handy if I ever died. Once you feel that you've geared up enough, you can tackle the final boss, which is Citra from Far Cry 3, who I'm pretty sure is Vaas's sister, who, as you might imagine, posed quite the challenge. After defeating her, Citra goes full-on Tom Hanks and becomes big. She then spawns 5 waves of enemies that you need to defeat, and each wave comes with a mini-boss to kill. After that, you walk into a bright, white light, and that's it. It's over. I don't feel like this DLC completely wasted my time, but I also didn't get a whole lot out of it either. It was a really cool excuse to revisit the character of Vaas because, you know, Vaas was awesome. And Michael Mando did a great job reprising his role. It was neat to be able to explore his character even further by being able to view his memories, and some of the visuals were interesting. It also had a nice atmosphere to it that was sorely lacking from the main game. This DLC cost me $15, and I got everything I could possibly get out of it in just under an hour and a half, so I really don't feel like it was worth the money. There are 2 other DLCs as well where you can play as Pagan Min and Joseph Sneezed, but after playing this one, I didn't want to play another. So by now, some of you may have noticed that the structure of this video is a little weird. I went from talking about combat, to microtransactions, to progression, then to stealth, when it would have made more sense to pair combat and stealth right next to each other since they typically go hand in hand with one another. Now, I've made the structure strange by design in order to convey my experience with Far Cry 6 to you, the viewer. There are so many systems and mechanics in this game that, to their credit, all work on an individual basis, with quotations around the word work, of course. But it never comes together to feel like one cohesive whole, making the entire gameplay experience seem like a directionless, disorganized mess. Some of the guns feel pretty good to shoot, but the enemies don't, thanks to their brainless AI. The cars are fun to drive, but there's rarely an opportunity to drive them. The map is massive, but the world feels so hollow. There are hunting spots, but I saw absolutely no reason to hunt for anything at any point. There are side activities that reward you with weapons and gear that don't even hold a candle to the weapons and gear you get from completing the main story missions, making the side content feel unsatisfying and redundant. They tried to offer up a new challenge in the form of guerrilla mode, but then they give you several guns that actively negate its difficulty. They give you a wingsuit, but don't give you anything to do with it. I was shocked to see that the wingsuit is easily the most boring mode of transportation in the game. In Far Cry 4, it felt like there were several chunks of the map that were designed for wingsuitery. It had you flying through caves and cliff sides, which was thrilling because if you so much as touched any surface, you would perish, giving the traversal a nice sort of risk-reward. But here in Far Cry 6, the top of the map isn't much different from the bottom of the map. It's just a big old empty space. And there's barely any opportunities for risky wingsuit behavior. It's no more than a tool to help you get from one point to the next. In fact, in order to demonstrate this point to you, the viewer, I am literally writing this portion of the script as I travel to my next location via wingsuit. Now, every once in a while, you're able to wingsuit through some trees, and that can provide a couple seconds of fleeting fun. But your character's hitbox is so huge here that it simply isn't viable, and it takes away all the excitement. There was one time where I did manage to have fun in the wingsuit, and it's this clip right here, as I had several close calls, nearly scraping my belly on multiple surfaces. Some of these calls were so close that I was nearly able to answer them. It was the only time this game made me feel alive. After I landed, I felt awesome, only to have that feeling be completely ripped away from me.
You're following me! There's that true Yaren piece of shit.
What's upsetting too is swinging from your grapple actually feels pretty good and is a decent amount of fun. But in my 25 hours with this game, I only stumbled across 2 opportunities to swing around like this. At one point, I actually performed a combo of sorts by grappling, swinging, detaching at the right moment, and transitioning into wingsuit to fly out of there. This 10 seconds of footage you're looking at right now was the most fun I had playing Far Cry 6, and it made me realize that there's a huge missed opportunity here in the form of platforming challenges. Imagine being able to play some mobility trials that force you to go from wingsuiting straight into grappling, then parachuting, and then back into wingsuiting. There's all kinds of potential here, but Ubisoft seemingly refused to capitalize on it. Even though I was still only at level 4, I was pretty geared up at this point, so I figured I'd play a couple side activities to see what they were like. The first one I did was this treasure hunt. All I need to do is open up this door here, but of course it needs a key that I spent 4 minutes searching for, only to discover that the key was literally located right next to the very door I was meant to open. Cool. The mongoose was holding on to a different key that opens up this crate. This crate had a pistol in it, a pistol that I will never use. So this whole treasure hunt was a pretty substantial waste of my time. The other treasure hunts I played weren't worth my time either. They all involve having you spend several minutes searching for a key in some enclosed area, and the key is usually hidden inside of a predator with a big health bar. Getting that key allows you to go open up a crate that has a gun inside of it, a gun that I will never use. I did 3 of these and I never felt the need to do any more. Then I moved on to a supply drop interception, where I had to get to a supply cache in under 4 minutes. I was actually kind of enjoying this activity. The time restraint made it feel a little stressful. The music for it was awesome. And it reminded me of that super impressive cold open from Better Call Saul. I was making good time in this side quest too. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to complete it, until I accidentally drove into a main story cutscene.
Are you Philly? I'm Danny.
No.
And once the cutscene finished, I had, of course, failed the side quest.
Fuck! I'm out of time.
So I had to go back and climb all the way up this mountain again and restart it. I played a couple more interceptions because I kinda had fun with the first one I did. But now that I have the ability to spawn in a helicopter at some of the bases I captured, it made this entire breed of side missions more trivial than my pursuit of having fun in this game. And yeah, I know I could choose to play through these side missions with some kind of car and have a little bit of fun with it, but doing that would not be efficient in the slightest, and not being efficient impacts my ability to have fun, especially when the rewards you get for completing these are worthless. And driving a car only increased the risk of accidentally activating another cutscene. What would have been cool though is if each of these supply drop interceptions forced you to use specific cars for each one of them. Then they could tailor each trial to that specific car's handling, giving each individual trial a unique feel. They kinda did do this with the time trials. In these, you are forced to use a specific car, but the time trials are so simple that the only way you could fail them is if you drive into a cutscene. All you gotta do is pass through these checkpoints. You don't have to worry about getting a gold medal or anything special like that, and they don't cater at all to the handling of each specific vehicle. Just Cause 3 is a perfect example of how to implement side content into an open world game correctly, as that game also had time trials that forced you to use a specific car, and each time trial was handcrafted for that specific car, which incentivized me to play them all because I knew each of them would feel different. I thought they were kinda fun, and the rewards for completing them were very substantial. You could unlock the ability to have nitrous in any car you get into, or the ability to make any car jump by tapping B. Not only were these abilities just fun, but they were very practical as well. Whereas in Far Cry 6, time trials reward me with gunpowder, which I can use to craft a weapon mod that I'll never use. I also did a few missions where you steal supplies from Gus's men, but these are practically identical to the other supply drop interceptions I did, with the only difference being that I don't have a timer ticking down on my way towards it. I'm only required to kill a bunch of enemies when I get to this destination and hold the E key to steal whatever's in this crate for yet another reward that is of no use to me. In order to unlock more side activities on the map, you can gather intel from members of the Resistance.
Word is the artist Xenia Zayas wants to meet you.
But whenever I tried to get intel from somebody out in the open world, an enemy would always come by, and the NPC would stop talking to me and shoot at the enemy instead. Then I'd have to help them kill the 1 or 2 enemies that spooked them, which would reset the dialogue, and I'd have to listen to everything all over again before finally getting the intel.
Word is the artist Xenia Zayas wants to meet you.
This happened to me all the time, without fail.
The army's counting on getting those supplies, and so are we. Guerrilla, lookouts found a naval convoy running past the airport on the east coast of La Jolla.
It was such a waste of time.
What do you got?
No. Shit!
It got so bad that I wouldn't take intel from an NPC unless they were inside of a base I had already liberated, because it would not stop happening.
No word from Ortega Croc Farm for weeks now.
Now, it wasn't long before I didn't feel the need to play any more side content at all, since I was pretty well stocked up at this point. So I decided that I would try to unlock all of the amigos in the game, starting with the punk rock deadly mutant chicken named Chicharron. From a visual and conceptual perspective, I think this amigo is pretty cool, but in order to unlock him, you're required to play some of the most boring missions in the game. One thing this game does that I absolutely despise is it forces you to follow an NPC of some sort to or from your mission destination. But of course, these artificial beings can't sprint like I can. All they're capable of is slowly jogging toward their destination. They are poorly programmed NPCs who have no perceptions of real-life concepts like time or mortality. All they can do is complete their one and only duty as a character model, which is to waste my damn time. I recorded each and every instance that this happened to me in-game, and I'm going to show you how long each of them took to prove my point.
Yo sé que tú te callas, pero esto no funciona. Y sé que tú me engañas con otra persona. Y ya no aguanto más esta situación, porque pienso que el amor es cosa de dos. Y déjame, No calles por más tiempo tu infidelidad. No juegues más conmigo, qué barbaridad. ¿A dónde llegas con tu cobardía? Levántate y mírame a los ojos con sinceridad, que el mundo no se acaba con nuestro final. Cierra la puerta y vete ya.
And Far Cry isn't the only open-world franchise that does this. I think developers need to quit with all this in-game exposition business because it is an insult to the player's time. Either make it a cutscene that I can skip or make it interesting. There's nothing engaging about sitting in a boat for 3 minutes while somebody just spouts exposition. There's nothing interesting about following a chicken on a dusty trail as it clucks, plucks, and fucks up the enemy. And then once we get to where it needs to be, I'm meant to defend it from an onslaught of enemies that spawn inside an elevator, one at a time. In fact, Far Cry 6 has a lot of horde sections where you're meant to hold off several waves of enemies. Coincidentally enough, the very next mission after this one has you doing the same exact thing. Except instead of defending the chicken in a library, I was defending the chicken at an abandoned wedding venue. And just 2 missions before this one, I was defending this chicken from a bunch of dogs in an arena where they train dogs. The point is, I played 3 horde sections in a row. Whenever the game wants to pretend to be exciting, it just hits you with a horde section, where you're forced to kill every single enemy before moving on. One time, I did get lucky and I got to do a horde section that was hordeless. No enemies spawned in here at all. And for one of the other horde sections, I just hid in a corner to see what would happen, and I was stunned by the results. I did a quick count and found that Far Cry 6 had 13 different horde sections throughout its campaign. That's an awful lot of reusing the same gimmick. And keep in mind that these are only the horde sections I remembered to record, and I'm sure there are even more hidden in some of the side content I avoided. Now, having all these horde sections would be fine and dandy if the combat was actually fun to play, but standing still and popping enemies in the head over and over again isn't exactly my idea of engaging gameplay. So many other missions just have you doing busy work as well, like putting fireworks into trash cans, spray painting over William boards, getting drunk with your friend, having a DJ play your friend's favorite song, saving your friend from an innocent cow, killing high-ranking officers which have no differentiations from the regular enemies you encounter during combat, and they fall prey to just one shot of my nail gun like all the rest. What you're about to see is a member of Castillo's army who climbed through every rank of the military and became an admiral. A feat which requires intelligence and tenacity. Yet she never could figure out how to turn away from that wall. One time they tried to shake things up with a boss fight against a helicopter that had an absurd amount of health. So I stood in a spot where it couldn't damage me. I shot at it for a few minutes until I ran out of ammo. Naturally, I went to go find more ammo, and on my way back to this cheese spot, the helicopter somehow crashed into the ground all on its own. Yeah. Another time they tried to shake things up by letting me drive the world's weakest tank. It takes 3 shots to blow up an enemy vehicle that simply just sits still in front of you. It also takes 3 shots to blow up a helicopter that I could more easily destroy with 1 shot from a grenade launcher. Usually tank sections in video games are meant to be empowering, right? Like the bridge section in Halo 2 where you destroy Covenant forces with ease. Or even the tank section from Battlefield 1 where you shoot Nazis with a tank. But in Far Cry 6, you just follow this trail for an eternal 4 minutes, while nearly indestructible enemy vehicles actively block your path and waste your time. This tank is so weak that it can't even run over a flare. But it has no problem running over my allies. Then, just randomly in the middle of the game, I stumbled into a mission, which was nothing more than an advertisement for the 4th season of Stranger Things. All of a sudden, I was going through a Russian bunker, and next thing I know, I'm thrown into the Upside Down while standing right side up, and from there, things went sideways real quick. While this mission was out of place, it did give off the sense that it had a lot more care put into it than most of the other missions. And much like the Vaas DLC, it also had an atmosphere that was sorely lacking from the main game. Seeing this giant creature was pretty cool too, but it was a bit of a bummer that I wasn't able to fight it. There was a new enemy type, which were essentially just Call of Duty zombies that run towards you in a straight line, but it was still a nice change of pace. At the end of the mission, you have to outrun an invincible demon that has no hope of ever catching up to you. It was actually a surprisingly decent little mission, unlike the next one we're going to talk about, which made me want to uninstall the game.
Hola, welcome to my life. If you're looking for a party, stop on by. Fiesta, rest up and repeat. Yeah, it's getting caliente, feel the heat, don't stop.
Libertalia is throwing a party on an island to celebrate our most recent victory. Now, I love me a party, but before party time begins, we gotta get inside of a car and listen to somebody talk for a minute and a half as she drives us somewhere. Hell yeah. Then we need to get in a jet ski and drive over to an island. Then we need to sit around and wait for these two characters to quit talking. Then we need to follow one of those characters and listen to her monologue for a couple of minutes. She tells this long-winded story about how her dead brother tossed the barbecue grill into the ocean, so now of course I gotta hop into this ocean and grab the barbecue grill. Oh yeah. Now we need to go over to the other character and listen to her monologue for a couple minutes. She yaks on and on about her dead boyfriend or some shit, and now I am solely responsible for gathering all of the food for this huge party by myself. I fished for a few minutes, then I killed 2 crocodiles, and collecting their meat raised the meter up to 78%. And I think my game glitched out or something because there were no other animals on this island. So I spent about 20 minutes total catching fish for the progress bar to only go up a measly 1% per fish. This felt like such a waste of my time, and it pissed me off. After the Our Right to Party mission, it was just a tedious mad dash to reach the end of the game. I would open up my map, select a destination, fast travel, wingsuit on over to it, get some script writing done in the process, and once I reached my destination, I was shown a cutscene that I would almost always skip. Then I was forced to go into a different location entirely in order to reach my new objective. So I'd go there, complete my mission, and then I would repeat the entire process all over again. From loading screen to wingsuit to cutscene to objective. For 10 plus hours, I picked up antibiotics, saved hostages, blew up gas pipes to stop Gus's poison, blew up rum canisters, blew up actual gas canisters, and I killed each and every one of Gus's most important henchmen. So now, it was time to tackle Gus himself. I was pretty excited to be at the end of the game, and to be honest, I actually enjoyed the intro of the second to last mission. All of my overpowered weapons, my wingsuit, and modded gear that I'd been relying on throughout my entire playthrough were gone. All I had was a suppressed SMG and a pistol. I enjoyed the atmosphere as I slowly made my way through the canyon. The rain, wind, and music all made me feel as though something substantial was about to go down. But it wasn't long before I stumbled on an obstacle. Clearly I had to get over there in order to ride this zipline, but I had no idea how to get over there. Going down wasn't an option because the fall would kill me. I did spot a grappling hook earlier, but going down that would mean that I'd have to take the time to just swim all the way across the water and make my way over to those docks, which I really didn't feel like doing. And so, with my back against the wall, I solved the game's first and only puzzle. Now, I couldn't get spotted here, so for the first time in 24 hours of play, I took stealth very seriously. I grabbed a keycard uncontested and moved through the villa with methodical intent, killing only 2 NPCs before being treated to what I thought was one of the best cutscenes in the game, as our main character Daniel and our villain Gus finally cross paths over an awkward dinner, as our buddy watches from far away with a sniper rifle, making sure to keep his crosshairs on Gus's curly crossed hairs. This mission really stood out to me. I almost enjoyed it because it was one of the few that didn't involve me shooting a bunch of people in the head. I was forced to play differently because I had been given a terrible loadout. This SMG was about as useful as 1 Far Cry credit. If more missions had curated the player's loadout and had been designed around that loadout, this game could have been a lot more enjoyable. Then we get to the final mission, where a helicopter almost crashed on top of me, which was almost pretty cool.
What? I've reached Anton's tower. La Torre de fucking Leon. Time to slay the lion.
But for the most part, the final level just devolves into you headshotting everybody some more. Eventually, you make your way to some elevators, you hit the button to open the doors, but don't hit the button inside the elevator because they haven't finished that texture yet, and that's it. The nightmare is finally over. I had beaten Far Cry 6. I actually kind of liked the story toward the beginning of the game. The main character seemed likable and the cutscenes were engaging enough, but somewhere along the way the story started to get obnoxious with so many over-the-top kooky characters, juvenile jokes, and secondary villain characters who weren't very interesting, and I knew I was just going to be killing them within the next hour anyway. So I had to start skipping cutscenes because I didn't feel like they would be worth the amount of time it would take me to watch them. I did, however, make an exception and watched every cutscene with Gus in it because the villain is an essential part of the Far Cry games. Unfortunately, I did find the villain here to be super generic. He's just an evil dictator who feels that the ends justify the means. He is not intimidating, he's not terribly interesting, and he doesn't have that same presence that the other three villains had. I did like how he was training his kid to be a cold-blooded dictator as well, even though the kid was clearly not comfortable with some of the things his dad wanted him to do. But at the same time, he still yearned for his father's approval. I found myself invested in the villain's kid rather than the villain himself. I was curious to see where they'd take it to. Throughout the game, they showed this kid being trained to become a ruthless dictator. Yet he seemed like he had a good heart, like maybe he would attempt to steer Yara in a better and more fair direction. But at other times, it also seemed like he could go the other way and fulfill his father's wishes. But then, he just dies, which was really unsatisfying. I felt like nothing we were shown paid off. Like if I had skipped all the cutscenes with the villain in it, I would have enjoyed the game more. And as for the rest of the characters in the game, I can't really say I cared about them all that much.
Lita and I had a ritual. Psych us up before battle. A song. Hit me. El movimiento de libertad.
Now after the credits rolled, the game had a lot of brand new activities that it wanted me to complete. But upon seeing this, I shut the game off immediately and I have no plans to ever return. Which is a bit of a shame, I guess, because I had every intention of also reviewing the new Worlds Between DLC for this video. I even bought it with money, but I just don't have the willpower to play any more Far Cry 6. I would much rather go back and play Far Cry Uno, which is a real DLC that actually exists.
As any Yaran knows, there's only one way to spend a little free time. Uno, Yaran style.
I think if this game were more focused, if they cut the size of the map in half, made the side activities more varied by giving the player restrictions, fixed the balancing issues like allowing the player to have a nail gun at the beginning of the game, rewrote most of the jokes, had a more interesting villain, refined the enemy AI, and put more thought into the mission design, I think it could actually have turned out to be a pretty fun game. But you know, I liked Far Cry a lot more when I had no idea what to expect from it. Towards the beginning, it had you playing as a mutant with superpowers. Then Far Cry 2 was completely different with obnoxiously realistic mechanics like having your gun jam, having to constantly fix your engine, and getting malaria. Then when they did what they did with Far Cry 3, well, that's the one that made the most money, so they made that game again and again and again. And that was the right call for them to make at that time, because after Far Cry 3, we all wanted more Far Cry 3. I know I did. I mean, that's why I enjoyed Far Cry 4. And it definitely did help that they improved some of the gameplay, and riding elephants was awesome. Somehow way more fun and empowering than the tank in Far Cry 6. The tiny little helicopter was fun to fly, and Pagan Min was an awesome villain. And because of all that, I was looking forward to Far Cry 5, which I thought was a real letdown. I didn't care for the villain, the jokes, the location, the terrible AI, the rampant bugs, and what had then become a repetitive formula, especially after Blood Dragon, Primal, and then a year later, New Dawn. We've had 6 or 7 games with this formula. And if things don't change, then it's very likely that I won't return to play Far Cry 7, and I'm probably not alone in that sentiment. I want to see Far Cry do something completely different again. I want to see Ubisoft take the franchise back to its roots by making it fresh and unpredictable. Ubisoft, you need stop making the same damn game over and over again. Thank you, and good night. Everybody go watch my other content. It's pretty good. If you don't believe me, just check it out, you'll see for yourself. I also really want to thank my patrons whose support make videos like this possible. I've also added the ability to become a member here on my channel, which will give you access to the same stuff my patrons get. I'll also be doing members-only streams on here where I'll go through the process of what it takes to make videos like the one you just saw. So if you're interested in becoming a content creator or just content creation in general, it might be of interest to you. And lastly, if you're watching this video before the date you see on screen, I need you to know that on this date, a community member of mine named Soapy64 will be hosting a live event in VRchat, where we will all be watching the major ocean picture Surf's Up, and you're all invited. It should be a pretty fun time. I want to try to get myself more involved with this community here, so yeah, I wanted to try something like this out. Anyway, I hope to see you there, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.